Don't know why.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Are we on? Uh, Good morning. I want to go on and call it good. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure virtual land could hear me.
We can hear you.
I would like to go on and call this meeting to order. It is now 9:32 a.m. And I'd ask any members who are calling in by phone to identify themselves if we have anyone. And as a reminder, if a member of this body is attending remotely, but is not at the location specified on the agenda, they may observe and comment as a member of the public, but may not participate in any member discussions or voting of this body. The meeting of the Energy and Environment Committee is now called to order. And I'm going to call upon Britt to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance because she's indicated she's here in person as well. So if you guys could please stand and join us. Ready? Yeah. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I will ask the clerk if she will confirm a quorum.
Yes, Madam Chair, we do.
Okay, thank you. All right, we are holding this meeting in compliance with the Brown Act rules relating to telephonic video conference meetings. SCAG's office are open for members of public to attend and participate in person. Instructions for providing public comments have been provided in advance and also included in the agenda packet. Just as a reminder, to reduce background noise, please ensure that your microphone is muted when not in use. Now, public comment period. Have we received any comments prior to the meeting or comments for the put on the agenda?
We have not.
Okay, I would ask for any public comments of the meeting. And this is the time for members of the public to offer comments or matters that are within SCAG's jurisdiction, but are not listed on the agenda. And we have not received any. Okay, do we have any members of the public? I see some sitting in the audience, but I don't know if they are members of the public and need to comment. Okay. So I will now close the public comment period for matters not listed on the agenda. And we will review the agenda. Is there any, I would like to remind everybody to unmute your phone before speaking and state your name during deliberations and whether making a motion or offering a second. For those who have joined by phone, press *6 to mute and unmute your phone. Okay, our first order of business is going to be the election of chair and vice chair. Is that correct, everyone? Just nodding of the heads. Thank you, guys. Okay, legal. I will ask you to announce the nomination for EEC chair, which was received prior to 5 p.m. March 28th, deadline for nominations.
Great, thank you. We received one nomination for EEC chair received from Luis Plancarte of Imperial County. In addition to nominees received before the meeting, SCAG's rules allow for nominations from the floor. The process for nominating from the floor and the election is as follows. A nomination does not need a second. A member can nominate themselves. Please raise your hand to be called upon and announce your nomination. After additional nominations have been received, if applicable, I will repeat the names of the nominees. Once we've received all nominees, we will offer each candidate an opportunity to address the committee and leave brief comments. Then we will turn it over to the clerk for a vote. You will vote by naming the person for whom you'd like to cast your vote for chair, unless we only have one nominee, and then it would just be an aye. Those are the rules for the election.
Okay, well, quickly, we'll open the floor for nominations. Is there anybody else other than the person who submitted their name or anyone in the video conferencing Zoom who has indicated that they may want to put someone else's name into nomination or themselves? Okay, seeing none, I will call for the nominee who is Supervisor Luis Bencarte to possibly speak, if he'd like to give us any comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I was kind of really looking forward to this opportunity. For the last 7 years, I have served on ECC and have been vice chair for 3 of those years. I probably traveled the farthest from most members of our groups to come to these meetings. And having said that, I think I've missed 3 maybe over the last 7 years, just primarily due to COVID. I really ask for your vote. I look forward to continuing to serve. As you know, my term ends December 31st as a supervisor, at which time I'll take on full duties as a grandfather. But for the next 8 months, I am really committed, and I'm really hoping that I can continue to lead this organization, this committee, and take care of the good work that's needed ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Now, just before we call for the roll call vote, is there anyone in the public, both virtual or here in the audience, that would like to have any comments? Hearing or seeing none? Okay, we've taken care of that. So clerk, I would ask for you to do a roll call vote, or would you prefer to just have everybody say aye? You want a roll call vote? Okay, go right ahead. Great.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll proceed. Damon Alexander,
Yes.
Anna Beltran, Art Bishop,
Yes.
Phil Brock,
Yes.
Robert Copeland,
Yes.
Jenny Crosswhite,
Yes.
Ned Davis,
Yes.
Rick Dennison,
Dennison, yes.
Carmen Hernandez, Sherry Horn,
Horn, yes.
Britt Huff,
Yes, here.
Dan Kalmick, Dan Kalmick,
aye.
thank you. Joe Kalmick,
Yes.
Elaine Litzer,
Yes.
Vianney Lopez, Lauren Meister,
Yes.
Luis Blancarte,
Blancarte, yes.
Daniel Ramos,
Ramos, yes.
Deborah Robertson,
Yes.
Jose Sanchez, Jeanette Sanchez Palacios,
Yes.
Jennifer Stark, Ali Taj,
Yes.
Tamala Takahashi,
Yes.
Connor Trout,
Yes.
Stephanie Bergen, Dale Welty,
Yes.
Edward Wilson, Edward Wilson, okay, Madam Chair, the motion passes with 21 votes for yes, 0 votes no, and 0 abstentions.
Madam
you,
Chair,
thank
can I ask,
Hi.
this is Margaret, can I ask?
Yes,
a
I saw your
question?
hand up.
Yes,
Yes, please.
I have a bad cough, so I'm not coming, but I couldn't do it. I didn't know I was going to be sick, so I didn't get in the time. 2 days ago I did. So am I able to vote?
Council.
Unfortunately, we can't count your vote because you're not here. And while you do have a just cause exemption reason to not be here, we have to have a quorum in the room for that. And we do not have a quorum today in the room. However, we can certainly note that you were in favor of the candidate.
Okay, she's on the route. All right, good. So now we will move on to the vice chair. And again, I will turn to council so he can lead us through that process.
Thank you. We have one nomination for EEC Vice Chair, which has been received from member Jenny Crosswhite. In addition to nominees received before the meeting, SCAG's rule allowed for nominations from the floor by the previously described process.
Okay. Is there anything else? Okay, we're going to open the floor for any other nominations that might want to come from the floor or also come out from the Zoom virtual. Is there any? Seeing none? Okay, then I'm going to call for closing the floor. Is there any public comments? Even though it was not, okay. And seeing none, then I would ask if Jenny would like to have a few words, give us some thoughts.
Just real brief. It's been great serving on this committee with all of you, and I have yet to miss a meeting, so that it's been a great experience, and I would be an honor to serve as the vice chair of this subcommittee.
All right, thank you. So with that, I will now ask for our clerk to do a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Damon Alexander,
Aye.
Anna Beltran, Art Bishop.
Aye.
Thank you. Phil Brock,
Yes.
Robert Copeland,
Yes.
Jenny Crosswhite,
Yes.
Ned Davis,
Yes.
Rick Dennison,
Dennison, yes.
Carmen Hernandez, Sherry Horn. Oh, Carmen Hernandez, thank you. Sherry Horn,
Horn, yes.
Britt Huff,
Huff, yes.
Dan Kalmick,
Aye.
Joe Kalmick,
Yes.
Elaine Litzer,
Yes.
Vianney Lopez, Lauren Meister,
Yes.
Luis Placarte,
Blancarte, yes.
thank you. Daniel Ramos,
Absolutely, yes.
Deborah Robertson,
Yes.
Jeanette Sanchez Palacios,
Yes.
Jennifer Stark, Ali Taj,
Yes.
Tamala Takahashi,
Yes.
Connor Trout,
Yes.
Stephanie Bergen, Dale Welty,
Yes.
Edward Wilson. Okay, Madam Chair, the motion passes with 22 votes for yes, 0 votes for no, and 0 abstentions.
Congratulations. All right. All right, to the chair and the vice chair. And I would just like to say in closing that as Luisa noted, I have been, I think, the chair now for almost 3 years. I'll say 3.5 because I believe I went in when Pollock, and this is my second time being the chair. So I think I thoroughly did my duties and been as involved. This is a fantastic policy committee. And I'm glad that over the period of time, we finally managed to elevate and raise the issue of the water and things of that nature being important to our environment. So I'm excited. I try to wipe the grin off, but I'm really excited. That yesterday, those who were with us in San Bernardino County, I shared with people, I've been the chair of the city selection committee for San Bernardino County for 4 years. So, there's some points when you do want to lighten your load. And I appreciate all of you. I've really enjoyed the fact that we're here, and I will still be involved as much as I can be for energy environment, not only at this platform, but at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, at Cal Cities, because our environment is just so important to us. And without it, I don't know if we would definitely perish. So thank you guys. Now we'll move on to our consent calendar. And do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this, on the consent calendar, on the items?
I see no raised hands.
You don't see any? Thank you. And so in the order of saving time, is there anything that anybody would like to pull any of the members to address on the consent calendar? No?
Motion to move the consent.
Okay, we've had a motion. Was that you,
Second.
Ally?
Yes.
And seconded by Daniel. So any objections? Roll call then, please.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Damon Alexander,
Aye.
Annabelle Tran, Art Bishop,
Bishop, yes.
Bill Brock,
Yes.
Robert Copeland,
Yes.
Jenny Crosswhite,
Yes.
Ned Davis,
Yes.
Rick Dennison,
Dennison, yes.
Carmen Hernandez,
Yes.
Sherry Horn,
Horn, yes.
Britt Huff, Dan Kalmick,
Kalmick, aye.
Joe Kalmick,
Yes.
Elaine Litzer,
Yes.
Vianney Lopez, Lauren Meister,
Yes.
Luis Plancarte,
Carte, yes.
Daniel Ramos,
Ramos, yes.
Deborah Robertson,
Yes.
Jeanette Sanchez Palacios,
Yes.
Jennifer Stark, Ali Taj,
Yes.
Tamala Takahashi,
Yes.
Connor Trout,
Yes.
Stephanie Bergen, Dale Welty,
Yes.
Edward Wilson. Okay, Madam Chair, the motion for consent calendar passes with 22 votes yes, 0 votes no, and 0 abstentions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So now we can move on to the action items. And the action item before us is recommend the Regional Council approve the Southern California Clean Cities Coalition Strategy Plan. And so do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this item?
I see no raised hands.
Okay. Though having not had anyone, I'm going to ask and call upon, is it Marissa? Good morning, Marissa, to the Principal Regional Planner, and she will now give us the presentation. Thank you, Marissa.
Great, thank you. Good morning, committee. And I just wanted to echo also congratulations to the new chair and vice chair. And thank you so much to the outgoing chair for your leadership and support over the last couple of years. Certainly an exciting day to be here. I know we all probably have Connect SoCal on the brain, but I wanted to also bring to you today another plan and another action we would like you to consider and recommend for RC approval. Our Southern California Clean Cities Coalition Strategic Plan. My name is Marissa Laderack. I am the new Coalition Director here for SCAG's Clean Cities Coalition. Very happy to run through the plan quickly, and I'll hopefully have a few minutes of time for questions at the end. Oh. All right, there we go. So first, I just want to provide a little bit of context about the Clean Cities Coalitions, the general nationwide network. So we were essentially established back in 1993 in response to the Energy Policy Act of 1992. And this act actually requires certain vehicle fleets to acquire alternative fuel vehicles and to start tracking certain things related to costs, things like that. There's actually 75 plus more than 75 clean cities coalitions within the US. And the purpose of these coalitions really is to strategically create active partnerships with public and private stakeholders. So that is a big part of what we do as a coalition. And then, as I mentioned, there's over 75 coalitions across the nation, and you'll see that there's actually several here in the Southern California area, which I'll talk about in the next few slides as well. To get an idea about the kind of work the coalition tends to do, here's a number of activities, and you can see that building partnerships, again, is one of the top ones here. We also have, we always want to make sure that we're leveraging expertise from federal agencies, from national labs, from fellow coalitions, things like that. And we always try to bring that information as well as the tools and the resources to communities so we can help to develop community-driven solutions based on a lot of things like local needs, unique understanding of opportunities and markets. And here's also just a quick helpful graphic providing a little bit of oversight and a little bit of information about what coalitions tend to do, including helping businesses and consumers adopt alternative fuel vehicles and advanced transportation technologies, things like helping school districts adopt buses with lower emissions, things like that. And then every 4 years, each Clean Cities Coalition is required to go through the process of redesignation, which we just did in August of last year. So we were recently just redesignated. And our Clean Cities Coalition has technically been around since 1996. And as I mentioned, we do have 4 other coalitions that are in the Southern California area. These include Los Angeles, Long Beach, Coachella Valley, and Western Riverside. And we essentially have an open door policy. If any of those coalitions ever wants to partner with us on anything, we always welcome that. Now, as far as our responsibilities go, we typically are required to track a number of things. This includes alternative fuel pricing. This includes the new acquisition of vehicles, new building of stations, new alternative fuel data station opening and closing. Those are the types of things that we track, and we typically include those in our annual progress report. However, I am here today to talk about the Clean City Strategic Plan, which is a very brand new requirement for us as a part of our coalition responsibilities. So every coalition's going through this the first time, as well as us. We are all preparing our first Clean Cities Coalition strategic plan together. So this is our first time taking a pass at this plan and bringing it to you for consideration. Now, pursuant to the DOE, the plan has to be a multi-year plan that specifies objectives, activities to be undertaken by coalition stakeholders, and very specifically to achieve a 16% increase in gasoline gallon equivalent GGE displacement and a 20% reduction in GHG emissions annually. We've addressed these targets very specifically by calculating impacts from current projects underway. I'll discuss that in a few more slides as well. So another thing that I want to emphasize as far as the strategic plan goes, we really did a thorough job in making sure we could align all of our existing plans, programs, and documents. And that includes taking a look at our clean technology program and the recently passed policy resolution just last April here. And this helps to define our clean transportation technology and also reaffirms our position on technology neutrality, which are two things, two very important elements we carried forth in the strategic plan. And some of the topics we include the strategic framework. We also have a little bit of let's say context about existing conditions. That includes things like the need to transition to clean transportation, what the existing alternative fuel options are, types of vehicles and infrastructure. Talk a little bit about emission reductions, barriers to adoption, and again, making sure that we're aligning with state policies, programs, and SCAG's work efforts. And then finally, we have a strategic plan roadmap that helps to outline those next steps. And then as far as Connect SoCal goes, we also have a number of implementation strategies that were identified in Connect SoCal. These are related to clean transportation. We made sure to pull those out and use those in our strategic plan as well. And these are a lot of the things that we've brought to this committee, to other committees. So there's no surprises here. You know we need to expand EV charging infrastructure. We know that we can do more work to incentivize the implementation of these things. We know that we've got state and federal policies that we have to abide by. So these are a lot of the things that I'm sure several of you are familiar with, and there are a lot of the things that we strive to accomplish as an agency already. And as far as our roadmap goes, specifically for those actions to displace GGE and reduce GHG, we do have this roadmap that outlines our high-level deliverables, but it also includes these targets. Now, these targets were produced with generalized calculations, and again, looking to capture our current programs, projects, and plans underway. Our goal was really to utilize any existing efforts that we have rather than creating extra work or duplicating efforts elsewhere here with the agency. So one more thing I'd like to emphasize, these targets are visionary and aspirational rather than mandated and enforced. So our GHG reduction targets for Connect SoCal, for instance, those are very specific and we must hit those goals. But here there's a bit more flexibility. And just quickly, I wanted to run through a couple of the things that we've used to essentially put together these calculations for our targets. The first one, our last mile freight program, you may be familiar. That is something that is currently underway. And that's looking at purchasing and bringing in 200 plus zero emission and near zero emission vehicles by 2024. So that's this year. And with that, there is an associated GHG reduction and GGE displacement. And we've put together a rough calculation of what that looks like. So we know how we can add these things up to meet our goals. Additionally, our clean technology program, if we were to, let's say, get awarded funds in the future, we could look to purchasing more vehicles, just like we did for the last mile freight program. And then there's an associated calculation for reduction and displacement with that as well. In all of these projects here that I'm going to run through, these are all things that we either have underway, or they're things that if we had funding for them, they're kind of like our wish list project ideas. So that being said, one of the other projects we have underway is this automated intersection monitoring for EVs. It's a pilot that we're doing with the University of California, Irvine and the city of Irvine. And theoretically, if we're looking at a 4-year horizon, we could see as many as over 3 million gallons of GGE displaced. So again, another opportunity to capture some of these metrics. And then we also have our EV charging infrastructure expansion and ZETI implementation. Assuming that everything continues with that at the same speed, the same pace, there will be some reductions we can capture there as well. And then the last two, those are for again, these kind of like wish list ideas that we have. Should we get funding and we can focus on more alternative fuel vehicle deployments, we would love to. And there would be an associated reduction in displacement with that. And then additionally, we know, as I mentioned, we need to do some additional work to help incentivize some of the EV and alternative fuel vehicle adoption. That could be another opportunity for us too. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then just lastly, here's our timeline. We produced the plan back in January. That's when we had our first draft. In February, we also brought this to our equity working group and our regional transit technical advisory group. So we did do a few stakeholder presentations then as well. In March is when we completed the final, bringing in any input from those groups. And then here we are today requesting recommendation for approval for regional council. And then one other thing I'll emphasize is that this is going to be an annual update moving forward. This is something that we every year will be looking at updating. We've tried our best to align this, however, with Connect SoCal. So this technically has a 4-year horizon, but it will be updated every year. And that's it. So hopefully I've got maybe a few minutes for questions. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I will look to first, my screen hasn't gone off, so I don't know if there's anyone in virtual who have their hands, but I'll start in the room first with, I don't know who went up first. So Daniel, I'll start with Daniel. Was it Damien? Damien, and then Daniel, and then Britt. How's that? So
Thank you for your report. Thank you for your report. I appreciate it.
okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm a big alternative fuel person. So, and San Bernardino is getting a Tesla center in San Bernardino. We just found that out last night. So I'm happy because I drive a Tesla.
Congratulations.
Yeah. But anyway, beyond electric vehicles, I don't see anything. I know hydrogen is a part of that genre of alternative fuels. Why don't you mention that? Because hydrogen is better than electric. So
yes.
So why is that not prominently into your wish list? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It is in our plan. I will say it is in our plan. We do have sections that address hydrogen. We've also been bringing actually some content back in January, we brought some content to the regional council about hydrogen. So I can assure you it is one of our priorities. I think it's maybe just not in the PowerPoint, but it is in the plan. We do have a section that talks about it, and it is one of our priorities.
So how do we become a member of one of your clean cities? The coalition?
So technically, SCAG having a coalition means you are all more or less members. So it's if you would like to have your own coalition though, so like let's say San Bernardino County wanted to have their own, Western Riverside has their own. So you could go through the process of creating your own coalition, or you can be a part of the SCAG coalition that exists right now. So those are your two options.
Okay, because I see cities and San Bernardino having the largest number of warehouses in the region. I was just like, and to reduce the gas house emissions, I was just like to see how we can be a further participant in this type of initiative.
Absolutely. It is also one of our priorities. And maybe we can talk a little bit after this too, because there's a new Inland Empire working group that we are working on with Riverside. Maybe there's some opportunities for some collaboration there too.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I apologize. I don't have the late night radio voice, so this is what you get. But my question was kind of down the same lane there. Is I'm looking at the Clean Cities Coalition map here, and I don't see any high desert, cities on there. And Mr. Art Bishop, sir, or Ms. Carmen Hernandez, please feel free to chime in. Do you happen to know if any of those high desert cities, Adelanto, Victorville, Hesperia, Barstow, Apple Valley, are part of this coalition? And if not, what are the steps to getting involved?
Sure. So technically they are a part of our coalition. The way you can look at it is any community that's not in, let's say, Los Angeles, Long Beach, they're essentially within our region. So our coalition is kind of like an all-encompassing one, with the exception of those other coalitions that exist within the region. So that said, they can all be served by our existing SCAG coalition. But of course, as I mentioned, there are opportunities to create your own coalition if that's something that you're interested in.
Really quick, lastly, so would we just need to have our, team contact SCAG and just got it?
Yes, absolutely. At any time that you have ideas for clean cities that you'd like to, share with us, just contact me.
All right. Thank you. Britt? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. No worries. One question, when it talks about standardized policies and regulations that support clean transportation, does that include things like standardization in charge ports, or some looking at, the technology, or like right now, if you go to try to charge your EV, there's a bazillion different apps that you have to download. And if you don't have Wi-Fi, you're standing in the parking garage trying to get it to download. Or you go to a charger and you think, oh, good, oh, nope, this one doesn't match. So is that part of that bullet, or is there somewhere else in the plan that addresses that?
That is something we've identified in the plan, and absolutely something that we hear from folks a lot. That is one of the areas where we need standardization. That is identified in the plan, maybe just not in the PowerPoint today. And additionally, too, as an FYI, we plan to update this annually every year. We can update this whenever we need to. So if there are opportunities to strengthen our position on things like that, if new studies come out, we can add those to the plan to reference them, we will. So it is a priority for us.
Because whether it's EV or whether it's hydrogen, one of the benefits of someone's going to the gas station, it doesn't matter which gas station they can go to, they can use the pump as long as they're not using diesel, then they've got it, but they can go just about anywhere. And right now with some of the other technologies, you don't have that same flexibility.
Correct. And we are aware of that.
Okay. Now, Britt, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Could you elaborate a little bit on that UC Irvine Auto intersection monitoring for EVs pilot? Is that just for the Irvine area, or UC Irvine is overseeing a larger regional project?
Sure. So it is a smaller study area, mostly on the campus, but it's still a pretty significant size. I think they've got 18 intersections included. So it's a good chunk of area. Right now, we're not sure if that's going to expand or not. I know the project team is looking to see about additional funds and expansion, and that's kind of still up in the air. But that is the area. It is in partnership with the city, and it's pretty much confined to the college campus area.
Thank you.
All right. Now,
Madam Chair, we
ahead.
do. Member Takahashi has her hand raised.
Okay, please. Tamala.
Thank you. Excuse me. It's Tamala, like Pamela.
Tamala.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Tamala Takahashi from Burbank. Thank you for this presentation and for all the work that's gone into this strategic plan. So I have a few questions I have a question about data and what kind of data you're collecting for the report, the yearly report. And if there's three things I'm interested to see if they're going to be included in the data collection. The first one is, will there be inclusion of data of analysis for underserved and historically excluded neighborhoods? That's the first one. The second one, will there be an inclusion of metrics of the need of, or the impact, the current impact and the need for addressing that impact, for example, around freeways, airports, and areas that have higher emissions and generally have a higher need for reduction of emissions? So will there be any data on that on those areas? And then lastly, will there be data on specifically clean solutions or clean approaches for fast deployment emergency vehicles and long haul vehicles? So for fast deployment emergency and long haul vehicles, they all have challenges with electric because either it takes too long to charge or their charge is not long enough to do what they need to do for those kinds of vehicles. And our cities are at least our city's struggling with using clean energy for these fleets, even though we're required to, because it's just, if we're in an emergency or if they need to be out for a long time, they don't have access to charging. So those three are the data points I'm interested to see if those are going to be included in your collection and your report.
Excellent question. I will say that more or less, yes, to all of the above. Those are priorities for us as well. We are looking to develop some additional metrics going forward for the annual updates. And this is the opportunity that we have to really drill down into some of those specific areas that you mentioned. So those are priority areas. They are addressed in the plan. We are looking to expand data collection for them. Right now, it's a pretty prescribed set of things that we tend to capture, but we have identified that those are things we would like to do additional data capture on. So maybe we can talk a little bit after this or offline and discuss some more specifics, but it is something that we will be looking into. It is something that we strive to capture, or that we strive to capture going forward, especially into this next fiscal year.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. Was there anyone else that had their hand up out in virtual?
I see no raised hands.
No, you see no one else.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move.
Okay. Daniel's moved the item. Is this an action item to move forward?
Second.
And Britt would like to second it. And I just would like to say in comments that the information is great. I'm glad to hear that it's kind of ongoing, fluid. We can add to it, because I had a question as well. I've had one of our assembly members who actually is in Western Riverside County has asked me to help lead a discussion on how we can get conversion of the fleets for some of the independent operators. So I did see that, but in the interest of time, I will get directly with you, because I think that's what we need. There's big, huge fleets, but then there's the basic small business independents. And the question is the resources. So I did see a note that said there's grant opportunities, and I will get with you on that item. And I would encourage all the others to think about that. I also like what Daniel, you said, because we do have this broader thing, but once again, when we're looking at San Bernardino County, it's the landmass is so vast that it's hard to think, well, how are we going to focus on some things? We just had that conversation yesterday as it relates to the renewable energy network and rolling out energy issues. So with that, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll call for the roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right. Damon Alexander,
Aye.
Annabelle Tran, Art Bishop. Oh. I'm sorry. Okay.
Somebody needs to mute themselves.
Annabelle Tran, Art Bishop,
Art Bishop, yes.
Phil Brock,
Yes.
Robert Copeland,
Yes.
Jenny Crosswhite,
Yes.
Ned Davis,
Yes.
Rick Dennison,
Dennison, yes.
Carmen Hernandez,
Yes.
Sherry Horn, Carmen Hernandez, thank you.
Yes.
Sherry Horn,
Horn, yes.
Britt Huff,
Yes.
Dan Kalmick, Dan Kalmick,
Kalmick, aye.
thank you. Joe Kalmick,
Yes.
Elaine Litzer,
Yes.
Fanny Lopez,
Yes.
Lauren Meister,
Yes.
Luis Blancarte,
Blancarte, yes.
Daniel Ramos,
Ramos, yes.
Deborah Robertson,
Yes.
Jeanette Sanchez Palacios,
Yes.
Jennifer Stark, Ali Taj, Tamala Takahashi,
Yes.
Connor Trout,
Yes.
Stephanie Bergen, Dale Wiltie,
Yes.
Edward Wilson. Madam Chair, the motion passes with 22 votes for yes, 0 votes for no, and 0 abstentions.
All right. Okay, thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next presenter and an informational item. And this is going to be the California 30 by 30 Conservation Framework. With us this morning, we have Megan Hartel. And Megan is the Deputy Secretary of Biodiversity and Habitat for the California Natural Resources Agency. So welcome, Megan. And before we go into your presentation, I'm going to ask if there's anyone in the public that would wish to speak on this item before we get going. And I don't see anyone, no acknowledgement. So I appreciate that, Megan. And I know that you had a hard stop, but I hear that it's been a little bit flexibility added to it. So we welcome you, and you can go on and proceed with your presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. And can folks hear me okay in the meeting rooms?
Yes.
Excellent. And I see some thumbs up. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. And congratulations on your approval right now of the strategic plan. It was fun to sit in on the end of that and hear some of the discussion around it. So I have some slides today to walk you through California's 30 by 30 initiative, but we will have plenty of time for questions and discussion afterwards. And I will also put my name and contact information in the chat for anyone that wants to follow up with me or the team individually after this presentation. So as the chair said, my name is Megan Hurdle. I'm the new Deputy Secretary for Biodiversity and Habitat. I think I'm going on week 8 here at California Natural Resources Agency, but I'm coming off almost 18 years of working on Western conservation, primarily with the NGO Audubon, California. So while I'm sitting in a different seat, it's fun to get to advance a lot of the same work that I've been doing for most of my career. And now to do it through the framework of California's 30 by 30 initiative. And I believe I have power to advance my own slides. Let's see. I do. Okay, great. So I think we've all seen some of the headlines that have come out over the last several years that are talking about this joint crisis that we're facing of both loss of biodiversity and also the climate crisis. And I think it's safe to say that all of us that live in California have particularly experienced that latter one, the climate crisis firsthand, with some of the extreme weather that we faced, extreme heat, switching to flooding. And then associated with that is what a lot of scientists are pointing to, which is a mass extinction and loss of biodiversity. And what we've seen over the last several years is in response to that, international scientists and international governmental agencies like the United Nations have come together to call for an effort called 30 by 30. And I'm hoping this isn't the first time that many of you have heard of it. But if it is, I'll just spend a couple minutes explaining what goes into this. So 30 by 30 is the goal to protect 30% of the Earth's land and water by 2030 to halt the loss of biodiversity. And the reason that scientists have joined together to call for this is because they have shown that by having biodiversity and healthy ecosystems, we then can combat climate change. We can have healthier communities and healthier individuals and healthier economies, because many of our economies rely on the natural resources, whether that's food or clean water or clean air or fiber or any of the things that go into our production systems. So these are just few on the screen. You'll see a few of the papers that have been published on 30 by 30, so 30% of land and water by 2030, as well as a couple of the major reports that have come out, like the Indigenous Peoples Report that you see there in the center. So as usual, California was leading the way on this effort as international scientists started to call for it. In October 2020, the Newsom administration signed Executive Order N8220 that covered several things, but it also included a commitment to conserve 30% of California's lands and coastal waters by 2030. So making us one of the first places that had a formal proclamation by government that we were committed to doing this. And it also talks about expanding nature-based solutions and opportunities for access to really fit together with this 30 by 30 initiative. So after this executive order came out, my predecessor, Dr. Jen Norris, spent roughly a year working with the team here to conduct extensive public outreach to come up with a plan on how California was going to reach our 30 by 30 targets. So I want to make sure to give you some of these stats correctly because they're incredibly impressive and we're really proud of the public process that we went through. So we hosted 9 regional workshops that had over 2,500 participants in them. You can see the map of the regions that the team went out to and did regional workshops at. We had 5 topical advisory committees that provided us in-depth scientific and expertise on things like climate, equity, biodiversity, and the other topics you see listed on the screen. We hosted an online survey where we had over 850 responses from across the state. I'm really excited to see the geographic distribution of those pin drops on the state because it just shows that we had people coming from all over to add their thoughts on this. And we did over 70 tribal consultations and listening sessions, which is an incredible way for us to bring our Indigenous partners into this. Once we had a public draft, we also had an advisory committee that provided feedback on it, and we did public meetings to actually provide the public a chance to once again give a response to what we were laying out as our pathway forward. So we took all of that information, and on Earth Day, which is actually coming up on April 22nd, we released our report. Oh, because my background, you can't see it. So this is the Pathways to 30 by 30 report that we released April 22nd on 2022. After all of that extensive public outreach and input. And there's really 3 core commitments that are part of the implementation of 30 by 30 in California. And those are that we are going to center equity, justice, diversity, and inclusion in the work that we do through 30 by 30, that we will use it as a way to strengthen our partnerships with our tribal and Indigenous communities, and that really we want to see 30 by 30 not only protect biodiversity, but also make sure that we can continue to have economic prosperity, clean energy resources, and also a solid food supply in California. So these were the core commitments that we made across this. There's also 3 priorities that come out of the 30 by 30 Pathways document. And that is, the first is obviously protect and restore biodiversity. That is the heart of the 30 by 30 initiative. The second one is expand access to nature. We know that people need to get out in nature to improve their health, the health of the community, and also to create that durable love and support for our natural spaces and open spaces. And the third one is looking for ways to build in nature-based solutions into our 30 by 30 effort. So that's thinking about how do we improve climate resilience or do climate mitigation while also protecting and improving biodiversity. So any good plans got to have a strong definition for what 30 by 30 is. So this is the definition for 30 by 30. Land and coastal water areas that are durably protected and managed to sustain functional ecosystems intact or restored and the diversity of life they support. So the 2 pieces of this definition that are most important is the durably protected, which means it is under a conservation easement, potentially owned by government or a tribe, something that we know that that land will be in open space and managed for biodiversity going forward. The second important piece of this definition is that it is actually managed for biodiversity. So one of the things we think a lot about is how do we reach this target, but also provide public access. So there will be places where it is just public access and it's a park and the goal is not biodiversity. And there will be places where it's a conserved area where public access is not the primary goal. But there's also going to be a lot of overlap where we're able to hit both of those objectives in one place. So where did we start? So with that definition, we actually used 2 data sources to create a map that identified how much land we already had in California that we would consider conserved under 30 by 30 definition. And we were at about 24% of our lands and 16% of our coastal waters. And this is across a broad array of different landscape types. So you have things like dedicated conservation areas, open space. There are working lands with conservation easements on them that count toward this. Our marine protected areas actually make up the bulk of the 16% of the coastal water. What you'll see here is this definition in the legend says GAP 1 and GAP 2. Just to give you a quick background on that, those are USGS mapping codes that are used as part of some California databases that went into defining how this was selected. So since then, we've actually done an update. So about a year after the initial report was released, we did our first annual update. We will have another update coming out late summer or early fall. And in that first annual report, we were able to add roughly 631,000 additional acres as conserved under 30 by 30. So inching us a little bit closer to that goal. So we're 24.4%. I kind of wish that was 24.5 so that I could just round that up to 25 when I give this presentation, but we're almost there. And roughly 16.2% of coastal waters. And you can see on this map some of the orange areas that were areas that were added under that first annual report. So I did want to take a moment and go a little bit into the plan that we created as part of this. So these are the 10 pathways or strategies that were identified by the public through the public process as key to achieving 30 by 30 in California. And almost all of these touch down on the work that you do, which is one of the reasons I jumped at this opportunity to come speak with you today. So we recognize that 30 by 30 is going to be led by regional and local communities, governmental bodies, councils like yourself, because really the land conservation and management comes from the ground up. All land use is local, right? And so this is really a big place where we are hoping to engage with you and your staff and your constituents to achieve 30 by 30. Things like acquisitions and easements, looking to enhance public lands and coastal waters, all things that I believe this council and this body has talked about and thought about. A big one on here that I did want to highlight for you is number 5, and that's that institutionalizing advanced mitigation. Under this strategy falls regional advanced mitigation programs, or RAMP. And my understanding is that you actually have one down there called Connect SoCal, which I think I heard the last speaker bring up. So these sorts of advanced mitigation opportunities are a really great way to help contribute to 30 by 30. So the Connect SoCal and Transportation Financing Plan estimated that transportation project needs in your regions could fund $1 billion of advanced mitigation. That $1 billion going toward land conservation and management for mitigation would actually count toward our 30 by 30 acreage. So there's a really cool connection there that will help lift up the amazing work that you are doing in your regions as part of this statewide effort. And also, when we go and report to other subnationals and at an international level, we get to talk about the great work that's happening in each of the regions that counts for this. So I just wanted to put a little pin in that and a flag and a congratulations on the fact that you're considering working on a RAMP or Regional Advanced Mitigation Plan. And then the other one I wanted to point out here is number 9, which is our 9th strategy for pathways to 30 by 30. And this is a recognition that whenever you create a definition, there will be things that fall outside of that definition. So there are certainly places within California that are important for biodiversity and important for conservation that are either not durably protected or not managed for biodiversity. But that doesn't mean that they're not important and they're not contributing to the overall goal. So this really is a strategy that tries to recognize the broad swath of work that is going into this effort. So how do we run 30 by 30? So 30 by 30 is set up in a structure that you see over here on the right side of the slide. We are driven by a coordinating committee, which we call the Partnership Coordinating Committee. That consists of folks that are appointed by Secretary Crowfoot to help guide CNRA in our effort to roll this out and also provide an avenue for communication between us and the many groups that are working on this. On the outside of that, you see these additional bubbles of things like the Biodiversity Council, regional work groups, tribal partners, biodiversity networks. Those are all ways that the public can get engaged in the 30 by 30 management structure. And then finally, I will just say, because this is a grassroots up effort, really it is everybody working on this. So I'm hoping that you walk away from this presentation really feeling a part of this effort. And if you'd like to get more involved in the formal structure, please do reach out to me after this. I won't spend very much time on this slide, but I did want to point out that the Pathways to 30 by 30 initial report has several appendices which might be of interest to you or your staff, particularly Appendix A, which is the regional insight. And in there we go region by region and we highlight some of the comments that we received from those regional workshops. We lay out opportunities, we include maps of what is already conserved. And I think it's a nice guiding document to think about when you're looking at what have we already conserved and where do we need to go next. Finally, before I wrap up, I do want to touch on this incredible resource. As part of our Pathways to 30 by 30 document, we worked with Esri to put up a website called California Nature. It's live now, all the data is publicly accessible, and it's an opportunity for either professionals working on conservation, city planners, regional planners, or even the public to go in and be like, what is conserved in my area? How do I access it? What is the climate resiliency of that? What type of biodiversity is there? So I actually went ahead of this presentation and pulled a few screenshots. I'm hoping someone from Ventura County is on one of these screens. If you are, wave your hand. Ah, thank you. Okay, so the next ones are going to be for Ventura County. I hope you're all right with that. In the appendix of this presentation, I also pulled some high-level summary for the other ones. Let's see, let me advance here. Okay, so this first slide is our conserved areas explorer, and you can see where the red is are important inputs where you would select. So you would select on the left side that you're the county of Ventura. In the middle of the screen where there's an area, you would select county. And what you can see here is that in the county of Ventura, you have roughly 25.99% of your area conserved under 30 by 30. So congratulations, that's really exciting. You're beating the state average on that one. And you can see the map of your conserved lands on the right side here. Just a note, you know, we were working with existing databases. So you may have some conserved lands in your area that are not showing up on here. If that is the case, please reach out to me afterwards. We are making it very easy to update this data because we want to make sure we have accurate accounting on it. All right. So the next one I'm going to show is in the Biodiversity Explorer that we have here. Again, where the red arrow is, you would want to select Ventura County. And on the top half of the screen, you can see that we actually show what types of habitat you have conserved under the definition of 30 by 30. So you as a city planner or a regional planner could go in and look and think, okay, well, I've got a large amount of hardwood forest conserved in my area, but I actually don't have as much wetland conserved. And so maybe if I'm needing to prioritize investments, I could think more about what remaining wetlands we've got and investing in conserving those areas. And then the final screenshot I'll show you is of our Access Explorer. This one I think is really cool because it allows you to go in and look at your region and think about what percentage of my population and what is the demographic makeup of my population that has access to these conserved areas. So if you select your county where the first red arrow is, and then select on the bottom that screen piece, you can see that roughly 1% of the population in Ventura County is within a half mile of a conserved area as we currently have it mapped. So I think this is a really interesting one to look at as you think about your constituents and their ability to get outside and enjoy and receive health benefits from some of these areas. So I will just conclude with some asks, because never come before a body like this without having some asks and follow up on it. So the first one is help us improve our data and mapping. We are going through an effort right now to look statewide at what is already conserved and to start thinking about how do we connect those conserved places. Are there areas of the state where there's less conservation happening, or are there types of habitat where we're seeing less conservation? But to do that, we really need an accurate accounting of what is already conserved. So if you or your teams are willing to go into the CA Nature website and take a look at your county or your region and even just be like, wow, that massive regional park isn't on here and should totally be on there, we'd love to work with you to make sure we get that corrected. The second one is implementation. So that's advancing things like the Connect SoCal, regional advanced mitigation planning, doing conservation easements, funding areas for management for biodiversity and public access. Then we've also got sharing of informational resources. I'm happy to send materials for you to pass out to constituents or to put on your website, and would love it if there are other places that we should come present and have conversations. Would love to take advantage of that. We do at CNRA a series of webinars. We have newsletters and blogs. Would be happy to put anyone on those so that you can get information on how the updates are going. And like I said earlier, we will have our next annual report out in late summer or fall, as well as an annual 30 by 30 partnership event, which is open to the public. So with that, I will wrap up. I'll just quickly note in the appendix, which I believe is in all of your board dockets, you'll see that I put at least the conserved area for the other counties in there. Great, thank you.
All right, great. Thank you for the information and the presentation. Now, is there any comments? I see starting over here. I know I can't read your name, but I know who you are. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate it. I was looking through this and I was kind of concerned about the metric that you're using when you consider population and proximity to those areas that would be considered parks or conservation areas. Would that just be anything that has a dot on it? Or is there some kind of space allotment that would be considered? You know what I'm saying? Like our community backs up to the Josh Tree National Park. Well, that's a pretty big swath. We have some national monuments. And so how do we look at it?
Great question. So my understanding on the access. Oh, sorry, I've got a bit of an echo. Thank you. So my understanding on the access piece is it is actually mapping distance to where the point of access would be. So if you think of a place like Yosemite, there's really 3 main access points to Yosemite. So the population within a half mile of those 3 access points is not massive. But there are probably people that access the park not through formal access locations, but ours is really what are those formal access places. I'm not sure if I answered the question on that one for you.
Well, probably somewhat. I mean, we have a lot of areas that are considered conservation in the Mojave Desert, but proximity for being so vast, it wouldn't be the same, considered the same in some of the areas such as Ventura that you spoke of.
Right.
The landmass area is much smaller, and while our landmass area is much larger, we actually have, even by acreage, greater areas of conservation. So I'm trying to look at the relevance from one place to another and how that would be weighted, because I think they would both be looked at differently based on their zoning.
Yes,
so that was all I wanted to just question it. Thank you.
No, I think that's a really good point is, everywhere is slightly different, right? So you're going to have an urban area where people have a half mile access makes sense. But if you're in a rural area, it's unlikely that people are going to have a half mile access. So I think you do need to take into context your local situation, but happy to go offline and follow up if you think there are some corrections that we could make here or additional data that we could show that would better represent your case.
Absolutely. I think it'd be warranted for our area to be able to participate in the data set. Thank you.
Great.
All right. Thank you. Lauren?
Thank you so much. Good morning, and thank you for this great presentation. I'm from West Hollywood, and we're obviously a very highly urbanized area, and have little room for conservation. However, I would imagine we have potential for improving biodiversity and habitat. And in fact, we did a symposium on urban forestry and biodiversity a couple of years ago, and it was quite popular among our constituents. I'm wondering, in your initiative, what opportunities are there for highly urbanized areas, and how do we address competing interests? For example, we've seen where, because of the need for housing, we've had, developers saying, no more trees. We can't build if you put trees. So I'm just wondering, how do we balance that, and where does your initiative fit in for a highly urbanized area like West Hollywood? Thank you.
Great question. So even places like West Hollywood can have biodiversity. Some of those spots may be too small to show up on a map like this, but I can guarantee you the people that live in those neighborhoods will love to walk outside and see patches of green or trees that are hosting birds or parks that they can go to. So a couple things on how this shows up in urban areas. So I would say looking for those opportunities to put green spaces, trees in where people can experience biodiversity in an urban place. The second one is telling the story about the broader goal of conserving under 30 by 30 and why it matters at a global level for people and therefore matters for people and communities. So maybe the large swath of the Mojave Desert is not in their backyard, but by conserving that critically important landscape, we are improving our climate resilience, which ultimately will benefit people in West Hollywood. And then finally, I would say, for 30 by 30 to be successful, this is very much a movement. It's a movement of people that want to support conserved areas, that want to support access. So we need public support to do that, both in urban areas and rural areas. We need folks to vote for funding for conservation, to vote for things like parks and all of that. So that's how I see it touching down in the urban spaces. And though to your second question on the balance, this is really hard. I am a governor's appointee, and Governor Newsom's priorities include housing and access to housing, and also include conservation. And one of the ways that you can think about balance is to do things like regional advanced mitigation planning, or to come up with habitat conservation plans. And those are efforts that bring together both conservationists, planners, urban developers to think about where do we want to chart out our development into the future and where do we need to protect. And that way you've got a roadmap going forward that tries to both facilitate the development that we very much need for housing and affordability, while also conserving key biodiversity and open spaces.
Thank you.
Bill.
And while I appreciate what you're saying, Megan, and thank you for the report as well, like my neighbor to the left in West Hollywood, Santa Monica is also a severely impacted city right now with under 2 acres of park space per capita and an ocean in front of us, which is a great resource, but it is also a heavily polluted ocean, especially after the rains right now. And around our Santa Monica Pier, it is polluted pretty much 365 days a year. I've asked for warning signs to be put up along the waterfront to ask people not to swim 100 yards either side of Santa Monica Pier. So as we look at that, the fact that, yes, and everyone here has heard me talk about this over and over again, but our tree canopy has decreased by 6% alone in the last couple of years. It is way below what we think is necessary. We don't have enough parks, and I have a polluted ocean. How can you help with that?
Great question. So a couple thoughts on that. One of the reasons you have a polluted ocean is because your watershed is not slowing down and absorbing pollutants and runoffs as they go.
And a lot of that's coming from Caltrans or LA.
Yes, that it is a
State agency.
I can't fix
I just want to make sure you didn't think it's from us.
No.
We've got the Santa Monica Freeway runoff that goes directly into our storm drains. We're trying to capture. We just did a nationally recognized stormwater infiltration program.
Oh, nice.
However, on rainy days, it exceeds 1 million gallons, which is all we can handle. Yeah. And all that just flows directly into the ocean.
Well, I have to say, and I have a sweet spot for Caltrans. So whatever's going down there, it's not Caltrans, it's all of these, it's all the people in the
At
state.
This point, I'm in the point of blaming Caltrans for everything. They put up fences.
That's your tax dollars at work. Okay.
And then 2 hours later, the fences are cut. Anyway, go ahead.
As a person that drives, I can't not support Caltrans because I use their infrastructure very frequently. But it sounds like what you're already doing what I was going to suggest, right? Is one of the ways 30 by 30 can help on that is thinking about nature-based solutions to some of these infrastructure problems. And so thinking about when we have roads, are we creating animal crossings, which I know there's a big one happening in Southern California. Congratulations. Sorry if the traffic's being held up a little bit on that. But thinking about animal crossings, connecting conserved areas, and then exactly what you're doing, thinking about these stormwater runoff areas. There are natural solutions where you can conserve areas and also absorb floodwaters. We've shown that healthy grassland systems and oak woodlands can actually hold significant amounts of water during high flows and storm events, but they need to be healthy and resilient to be able to do so.
But if I can interrupt for 1 second.
Sure.
Just to follow up on that, that's all well and good, but with the RENA numbers and the pressure to build, any open space in our city, even a 50 by 150 foot lot, which is maybe all we have that's open, we don't have the opportunity to plant trees or create runoff areas because every inch of spare space is being required for 20-story buildings in our beachside community. So I guess, how do we find a balance?
Yeah, it is a really good question. And also I would probably turn that question back to you as the elected official that works in that city and the region. And
I'd rather
also,
put you in front of me on that.
and also say 30 by 30 is one of the ways you can talk about the need to do this, because you can point to this significant international scientific evidence that shows that if we don't preserve and conserve 30% of our biodiversity, there's going to be even more impacts for climate change on human health and human communities. So I would say use us as a talking point to help maybe stand beside you as you try to think about smart development within your region and your city.
Thank you.
Ryan, did you have something?
Yeah, just on this topic real quick before we go to the online members. I just wanted to note that there are examples of local planning efforts in our region that are looking at how jurisdictions can double up on their parks plans to also achieve 30 by 30. A good example being LA County's Park Needs Assessment Plus, which identifies opportunities, many of them within the urban areas of our county, which are not just parks for recreation, but can also support 30 by 30. So there are policy opportunities at the local level that we can all consider. Granted, every city is different, but just noting that there are models for this as well.
Thank you for raising that. And I should have raised that myself, because that is an exemplary plan and a really incredibly effort. So kudos for you.
Okay. Well, Megan, we have one other member who has something to say. And just so to finish up with Bill, I'm going to go out there and I think Santa Monica might have a overcrossing somewhere that's in the Caltransit's jurisdiction, and we can see if we can't turn it into a park like we've done down in San Diego. That would create a nice opportunity.
I just wanted to request that we make sure that we get the speaker's contact information, if she's okay with that. And it can even be sent to staff and you can send it out to us, but just so that there's any follow-up, or if anyone sees any thing in the data that is missing or anything, then they could follow up with her.
Thank you, Jenny. We do have a few hands up in the virtual, so hold on. Megan, we have a couple of them. I'm going to look to our staff to say who possibly popped up first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe Member Bishop was the first to raise his hand.
Good morning, Deborah.
Good morning, Art.
I hope everything.
And I know Rick. I just didn't have my glasses on or my cup of coffee.
Megan, thank you very much for your presentation. I do want to mention Rick Dennison. I thought your comments about Joshua Tree in your local area were outstanding. Megan, my question is, I want to make sure as you're looking at your 24.4% lands issue that I think I heard the answer that we're including all of our state and federal parks and national forests into that area. I know you talked already about the tribal areas. I wanted to know a little bit about Bureau of Land Management, because here in the Mojave Desert, where you actually have quite a few members speaking to you today are from, the majority of our county is actually BLM land, and I was curious if that was included. And then my other question was military. We have Fort Irwin military base that's over 1,000 square miles. And I know they have a massive conservation program and archaeological program in that area. And I'm just curious, are these part of your 30/30 or are they not included?
Great question. So I'll first say on the BLM land, it depends. I think we all know BLM serves many, many purposes with their land. Some of them are conservation areas and some of them are not. And so it really depends on the intent of the management of those lands. So just a reminder, the two pieces are, is it durably going to stay conserved and will it be managed for biodiversity? So Mr. Bishop, I'd love to follow up on that specific region and come back with you with an answer that is tailored to be like, this is what we have now and what we don't. And then if it's not right, let's have a conversation around it. For the military land, that's a good question. And I don't actually know the answer to that one. So I'd love to follow up with you separately on that one. I would suspect that it is not currently counted just because I don't believe we would consider that permanently protected. But I'm happy to have a discussion on whether that should be shifted. because there certainly are ecological values being served by military lands. I don't at all want to diminish that. And same with BLM.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's Archbishop Mayor Pro Tem for the town of Apple Valley, so I'm sure you can find my contact information. And I'm just curious, at 2030, when we get to 2030, which is literally right around the corner.
I know.
Are we changing to 2040 and 40/40 or?
It's a good question. You know, there are calls for 50 by 50. So there are some places like the Bay Area that have committed to a 50 by 50 goal. They define conservation slightly differently than we do. I think their definition with respect to whether or not it is durably conserved might shift some, but there are some places already doing a 50 by 50. So I'm not sure it will be a new administration at that point. One of my goals is to set 30 by 30 up to make sure that it's on a glide path to continue past the current administration. But it will be up to them to decide if it is to continue with a 50 by 50.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Deborah.
You're welcome. Next.
Member Litzer.
Thank you, Megan. I just have actually a quick question of definition and just for understanding, and I'm from Ventura County, appreciate you using us as your example, but you speak of 24.4% land, 16.2% of coastal waters. Obviously Ventura County, quite a swath of it is beach area. Is beach considered coastal waters? Is that considered land? Where does that, and when you speak of water, are you speaking truly of just preserving, is wetlands, for instance, land or water? I'm just trying to understand your definition.
Totally. And this was quite a hot topic of debate amongst the public and experts, particularly where do freshwater resources fall? Especially when you live in a state where you've got major rivers and streams that maybe don't flow year round, or wetlands that are semi-permanent or seasonal. So for the freshwater wetlands piece, those are counted under our terrestrial goal. They're counted under our land goal. Now we do have that slide where we break out by habitat type. So you can actually go in and see how many wetlands are conserved under terrestrial. But for right now, they are counted under land. For beach, my understanding it is also under land, but again, I'd love to follow up just to make sure I'm giving you the right answer on that one. That's the first time I've got that question in my first 2 months here.
Well, glad to give you a new one.
Yeah.
And we have with VCOG, we have a member, a gentleman who is just so adamant about coastal cleanup. And so I just love to be able to tell him what's happening and where it's being protected and what the goals are. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And by the way, I did give my contact information to Kim Clark. And so she'll be able to share that out with everybody.
Thank you, Megan. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We have one last person online. Member Clark.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Yes, I would really hope that you would lobby Sacramento on these things and watch the bills, because as Lauren and Phil said, we're built out and they're blaming us for lack of housing, for homelessness. We have to build so many, and they're zoning without backyards, so there's no trees. Well, trees clean the air and reduce the heat island effect. So we're in a conundrum, and we need you to look at their bills and say, hey, this isn't going to be good for the conserving that we're trying to do. Please. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. So my husband is a city planner in City of Sacramento. So I very much get to listen to many of these challenges over the dinner table and appreciate the hard work and hard choices you all have to make. And I will just say one of my roles is indeed to provide information for the governor to decide what his position is on the bill. So we do track on those. Ultimately, the decision is with the administration, but we do provide input on expertise on those.
Okay. Well, that looks as though we have concluded for the people who were in virtual as well here in the room. Megan, I just would like to say thank you. It was definitely a topic and a discussion that I happen to live in San Bernardino County, as well as a number of us. And I noticed that when you had a map up, it was very hard to see what was acknowledged in San Bernardino County. I think it was cut off in your slide. But with that said, I know I have a couple of members in here with me that I would encourage we go back and under our SB COG, San Bernardino Council of Governments, we invite you to come out and we can have a more detailed discussion because so I can respect and appreciate the challenges that a very urbanized area has. But I also noticed when I saw the San Bernardino County, we were like 44, 45% recognizing of a lot of land that has already been under, Bureau of Land Management, whatever, I assume that with it. But even within our respective communities, there's opportunities to create some biodiversity. I have a project in my city. I'm excited about it. It has taken on so many different forms, depending on which grants you're writing for. So it started out as a habitat, and it's been a place where now it's also a wetland, and it's all of that. And it was repurposing a old retention basin. So I'm going to see if it should be added for our contribution. So thank you for it. It was very enlightening in discussion, and I really appreciate you giving us the time.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And yes, again, happy to come have more in detailed discussions or presentations or even meetings with staff to go through the website and dig in the data. But thank you all for your time today. I've really appreciated it.
I was just going to ask you, is there any boards or things that perhaps we could get from you to offer to our schools? I'm going to be meeting with our schools, our STEM program on Saturday in Rialto Unified. I have Earth to Table Day coming up, and it's on the 17th. And this is where we really expose third graders, about 3,000, to understanding the benefits and things. And so I wouldn't want to make a short ask, can you come down? But I will follow up and see what you maybe could provide that would be informative for third graders to understand the opportunities. And the other thing I just want to add is that in San Diego County, there's a great park project that happened out and that really took an open area and allowed for it to become a park area, but also a very much biodiversity. So I will offline point that out to you as well, because I think it was really great what they accomplished in I would say East San Diego County, still urbanized area. All right, thank you.
Wonderful, thanks so much.
We're moving to, and that was informational only, right? So now we're going to move to our next one. Sorry, next one, stormwater capture and flood adaptation options. And I don't know, do we have anyone from the public who wants to speak on this?
I don't see any raised hands.
Don't see any, thank you. So then I'm going to call on Britt Sanders, civil and environmental engineering for urban planning and public policy at UC Irvine.
Thank you
for him to start.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today, Chair Robertson. I really appreciate that. It's an honor to be before all of you and to share the research that we've been doing at UCI and give you a sense of where we are now and where we're headed, and also sort of think about the ways in which members of this organization can participate and contribute to this work. So the gist of this presentation is that our research lab at UC Irvine has been, mapping flood risk in fine detail for some time, and we've started at community scales in places like, San Diego and in Newport Beach and also in Tijuana, and we've built that out into a model that spans Los Angeles County and a model that spans Orange County, and we've had some models building out into Riverside County, and we've had meetings with people in San Bernardino County and the public works departments of the counties typically. We've also been engagement with San Diego County and Ventura County. So we know that there is a gap right now in information about flood risk that is really important in a time of increasing flood impacts, at a time when we have increasing concerns about the ways in which land use change have heightened flood risks. More and more development leads to more and more runoff, and that puts additional stress on drainage systems. Another important driver is that we have rising sea levels along the coast, which are creating additional stresses there from higher sea levels, from waves, from sand starvation, which thins out the coastline. And we have changing atmospheric conditions, which leads to changes in the possibility of extreme rainfall and the possibility of more frequent rainfall events that could really put a big stress on our drainage systems. You may have heard about these atmospheric river events that are now sort of well covered in our news organizations and forecasting. But there's science suggesting that these types of atmospheric river systems that are impacting California are likely to be more frequent in the future. And so in that context, we've been building out these flood modeling systems, and we've been working with stakeholders to try to make information that's actionable, that's useful, and with an eye on reducing the impacts of flooding in a cost-effective way, with an eye on understanding some of the inequities in flood exposure that need to be part of planning processes to try to come up with both equitable and effective solutions. And what we have right now is a 2-year study that's underway with funding from NOAA, with the idea that we're adding some capabilities to our modeling system to allow us to better quantify the multi-benefits of different storm sort of flood adaptation options. And the reason we're doing that is because in many ways, the flood infrastructure becomes really like almost the most foundational element of achieving many other benefits, like stormwater capture, like more green space, like better water quality, like more habitat, more conservation areas. So we want to say, if we could adjust our flood infrastructure, we need to do it in a way that's not just good for flooding. We need to do it in a way that's good for all these other needs that we have in California. So moving along here, I'd like to give you a little bit of background about this NOAA program, because it also will feed into future funding opportunities for the regions to actually get funds for projects. So this is coming from the NOAA Effects of Sea Level Rise program. They have historically funded projects across the US where researchers partner with stakeholders on transdisciplinary coastal resilience science and tools. And we've been funded by them in the past. And then in the last round of funding, they were approached by FEMA and by the National Fish and Wildlife Fund with sort of the following sort of motivation, that the federal government would be stepping into increasing amounts of funding for resilience projects, for better water infrastructure, for conservation opportunities, restoration opportunities. And there's growing concern that the proposals that will be coming forward would not necessarily be the best projects. And the US government could be spending a lot of money on projects that just aren't as good as they should be. So their thinking was that, why don't we work with our research partners who've already developed relationships with communities on the coast of the US, where they have models that are already developed and they have stakeholders who have some experience working together. And would it be possible to build on those models to think through, what would like some smart plans and infrastructure projects look like? And how do we develop a set of tools that would allow communities at sort of the project scale to come up with a plan and a project design that could compete for some of these federal funds. So we submitted a proposal in collaboration with several different partners, including Los Angeles County, including California Coastal Commission, California Department of Water Resources, and we had other partners as well. And the project was selected. And the idea was to sort of take the existing Primo modeling tool that we had developed for the Los Angeles County and to sort of see if we could use that to explore the relative benefits and trade-offs of different strategies of flood adaptation. And that's sort of the spirit of this project. And I wanted to give you an update on that because there is an opportunity to participate and shape this project. It's a 2-year project in its first year now. And the motivation of the project generally is that Los Angeles has a history of big flood disasters. Main stem flood channels, like parts of the Los Angeles River, parts of Dominguez Channel, parts of Compton Creek, are presently undersized to contain a 1% annual chance flood. So there is, significant risks of overtopping. There's also increasing concern about rainfall on streets and local flooding that could present health and environmental justice concerns. This is also a region where we've had, severe riparian and coastal wetland and habitat loss from development. And so ideas of channel restoration and habitat restoration are appealing. But on the other hand, we can also point to a flood control system that performed extremely well this past year in terms of the main stem system handling one of the wettest storms we've had in decades. The fact is that the main stem drainage system of Los Angeles County is still performing pretty well at moving water quickly to the ocean. But what we have today is a sort of a desire for a different set of benefits. We don't want infrastructure that just quickly sweeps water to the ocean. We'd like to have infrastructure that has opportunities to slow down water, as we heard earlier today, conserve water. We'd like to sort of have more shade and more green space to deal with air quality, to deal with heat waves. And so we're asking, how can we, what's the potential to achieve a different set of benefits from our flood infrastructure options? This work, as for some background, was published in 2023 in Nature Sustainability, and it had been covered in the newspapers. You may have seen some of the coverage. So I think this is a photograph of the Los Angeles River, which I think helps us to appreciate the fact that there is huge potential for what we call multi-benefits of water infrastructure, in the sense that this infrastructure, the infrastructure we have today, was designed for 2 reasons. The first was to protect people from the danger of floods. The second was to promote economic growth. And those were the goals after, the 1930s and 40s when the system was built out. And the goals were sort of economic growth and safety from floods after a history of flooding disasters. But today we're looking for a different set of benefits out of our water infrastructure. And that means that there is enormous potential for that. But the question is, what's the feasibility of doing that? Is it realistic that you could, create a more naturalized Los Angeles River? I do like to use this photograph in the upper right, which is a Santiago Creek in Santa Ana, California, as a bit of an inspiration in the sense that this is a flood control channel that has a different mix of hard and soft elements. It has concrete walls on the sides of the channel, but it has a soft bottom. It has some oak trees that provide shade. It has an exercise trail. We have a lot of access to water infrastructure in Southern California in the form of, paved trails on levees, but there's no trees. It's a harsh environment. And we could imagine a different future, more aligned with the photograph on the right. So with this project, we are developing, with participation of cities and counties and environmental groups, a set of flood adaptation scenarios. And the idea is to sort of say, this is the system we have today. These are the risks we face today. These are the benefits we get out of the system today. If we're going to invest in sort of ways to manage flood risk, we want to set up 3 sort of end member cases, and with the idea of mapping out how much play there is in the system. How far could we go towards, having more stormwater capture potential, and how much would that cost? I think that there's a general sense that some options are prohibitively expensive, but it'd be nice to have some data on that and to map out these trade-offs, and then to create an understanding of the potential for some multi-benefit investments, so that when cities and counties have projects in mind for at their level, they then can draw from our research and say, yeah, the research shows that this is a nice mix of benefits, and apply for funding and try to get that funding for their projects. So the scenarios that we're developing is, one is a sort of business as usual investment in hard infrastructure scenario. That would be like raising levees, more storm drains, trying to deal with street flooding, levee raising to deal with main stem flood risks. That would be your business as usual approach. And that would likely benefit, really perform really well from a flood risk reduction perspective, but not score high from a perspective of, say, water conservation or habitat or access to nature. Another option we're exploring is a channel widening scenario. So where there are opportunities to widen channels and to restore riparian corridors. Thirdly, we're looking at stormwater capture as a way to reduce the stress on the main stem drainage system, slow down the water, process the water, get it into groundwater basins. And so we're viewing that as a combination of green and gray elements. I mean, some investments could be parks, that could be, strips along the road that sort of swales along the road that capture water and promote infiltration. They might also be cisterns or rain barrels, which you'd consider more of a gray option. So I think both of those are on the table, and then we can imagine combinations of those options. So the idea is to run our model with a set of different options, look at these trade-offs. The second question is, how do you measure the benefits? What's a reasonable way to do that, to map out these trade-offs and kind of a planning county scale type assessment? And so we're working on a framework that will allow us to sort of score these options in terms of economic, social, and environmental metrics. And lastly, this project's being implemented with techniques that we've refined for more than a decade, which is to ask communities to participate early in the process, to share their perspectives on what's at risk, what benefits are you seeking to accomplish, and trying to get that, so those community knowledge and values into how we think about the benefits of projects. And this box in the bottom here sort of just gives you a sense of the range of metrics you might want to use to think about a flood infrastructure investment. So this graphic here just exemplifies I went too ahead. This graphic here exemplifies just the detailed nature of our inundation model. So this detailed data is available with our models countywide, and it's growing. We have Orange County covered. We're building out a model in Riverside County. We've had some interactions in San Bernardino County, and we had a grant proposal in last year to build this out over all of Southern California. Unfortunately, that wasn't selected as part of like the UC climate action proposals. But that interest exists here at UCI. But the idea is to co-develop these models with an inclusive process, till we understand what people care about, what kind of projects are being considered, and trying to create a tool that can be used to think about not only the risk we face today, but the risk we could face in the future with a changing climate, and this risk we could face in the future depending on how we invest in infrastructure projects, channel widening or levee raising or better urban drainage or more parks. And the data is also really useful for updating planning. So understanding what areas might be suited to updated building codes, for example. This slide here is meant to give you a little bit of a sense of the ability to now compare options at the entire county scale. And this has never really been possible. The possibility of having a whole county scale assessment of flood risk at the household scale, and to think about who's expected, who benefits from different interventions, and then this type of data on who benefits, how big is the benefit, that can then be the part of really more thoughtful planning discussions about how what kinds of projects actually get built, and trying to strike the right balance between different types of benefits. I'll start off here with this medium blue color box, This is meant to show the 1% annual chance hazard as of today from just river overtopping or channel overtopping. And our model points to some, risks in the San Fernando Valley, some risks along the main stem Los Angeles River where channels are undersized, and also along the San Gabriel River. And then as part of our modeling chain, we can put that into a FEMA tool that estimates economic damages, sort of replacement costs from flooding, to get a sense of the economic costs of flooding. And there's also an intersection of our flood data with census data. And by doing that, we can see how many people are impacted. And we can also, with the census data, see, are these disadvantaged populations? Are these populations of color? And the graphic on the right here then shows sort of in sort of a bar chart type format, how different interventions might change the total losses of a flood or the exposed population of a flood. So going back to the left-hand side, if I went to this orange box, this box represents a scenario where we've raised levees. And the raising of levees reduces flood risks along the channel and up here. So it's a pretty proven method to contain more water is to raise levees, reduces losses. And you can see that when the levee scenario is implemented, the model then predicts far fewer losses across different social groups. And the ability to kind of understand the equity aspects of these projects, who's benefiting from the projects across social groups. We can do it across municipalities. Are projects preferentially benefiting, communities like closer to the coast, or are they benefiting projects in the upland areas of the watershed? That's another distinction that can be made. One of the interesting findings of this particular graphic, which appeared recently in a new journal article, is that investments in higher levees are good at reducing exposure for everyone, but they don't actually reduce the inequities in flood exposure that we had seen in Los Angeles County. So in Los Angeles County, our results pointed to a disproportionate exposure for Black and Hispanic populations along the LA River. And as we invest in higher levees, there is a reduction of exposure for all social groups, but not necessarily a reduction in the proportionality of the exposure. Whereas this panel on the very top is a panel that corresponds to a lower flood peak, which could be accomplished with more stormwater capture or different reservoir operations or larger reservoirs. There's different ways you can get at a lower flood peak. But a lower flood peak seems to be much more effective at reducing exposure for everyone and reducing the inequities. So we thought that was like an interesting finding, and that was reported recently. This graphic here just gives you a broad sense that we're trying to create a set of economic, social, and environmental metrics that would allow for communities to get us to have a handle and have a conversation about the relative benefits of infrastructure investments, flood infrastructure investments, not just looking at damages avoided, which has been how flood management has largely been done in the past. As projects have been justified based on how much economic losses are likely to be achieved by that infrastructure. And now there's been a change in Army Corps policy. There's been a change in the way FEMA looks at projects, and they're looking for an understanding of the benefits across economic, social, and environmental evaluation. So our modeling is then is being configured to sort of in line with these policy changes. Just a bit of a project timeline. We're working through working groups this year. We've had meetings facilitated by the Los Angeles Regional Collaborative for Climate Action. So if your community would like to be a part of that, please, I can connect you with that and get you involved in meetings where we get ideas about how to set up these scenarios, where's good opportunities for channel widening, and so on. So, and then we're also hoping as of next summer to have a closing symposium/workshop where we share some of those results. Where we're looking at data needs and where we could benefit from everyone's participation now is more information about what are cities, what are communities thinking about in terms of how you want to capture stormwater. We know that Los Angeles County already does a lot of work with reservoir operations to store water, to then get it into the spreading basins. And that's a big, big part of stormwater capture in the area. But we know that there's more to be done, especially areas to try to reduce the amount of urban runoff from the street areas, park spaces, rain barrels. And so it'd be nice to get a sense about that potential. We have also been reviewing the LA LA DWP did a stormwater capture master plan that we've been looking at. It's like it's almost a decade old now. Amazing. It's gone by so fast. Another sort of data need could be also in thinking about, channel widening. Are there channel restoration opportunities that communities are thinking about that we could learn from in terms of how you're thinking about it? Where could it work? Where could it not work? We don't want to model one specific project or very specific projects across the county. We want to instead do something somewhat conceptual, so that it's not necessarily an analysis of any one particular project, but it's representative of strategies. So we'd like to be able to share results that are countywide, that have regional implications about the relative benefits of different strategies for stormwater capture and channel restoration. I'd also like to sort of mention that, as I mentioned earlier, that FEMA BRIC is a program that I've been sort of interacting with lately. They would like to fund projects that build resilience across the US. They have a goal to go from somewhere around like 20 BRIC, what are called DTA projects, up to like 100 BRIC DTA projects. Those are projects where they come in and assist disadvantaged communities with their infrastructure planning. So they've come to us, in the sense that they view our modeling as like a good tool that could support community planning and be a first step towards helping communities come up with more specific project plans. So that's something to be aware of, is that there's interest in FEMA BRIC to sort of make investments in Southern California. I'd also like to mention that we're also in conversation with California Department of Water Resources, who's also been looking at Southern California and thinking about how they can play a more visible role in managing flood. So they're interested in sort of partnering with this type of modeling. I'd also like to point out that the Safe Clean Water Program is incredible funding source for LA County projects. Mainly these tends to be stormwater capture and water quality, but I think our work allows us to intersect that with flood risk and to think about, could a project, say in the upper watershed, also be scored for benefits because of what it does for the downstream communities as well. Army Corps is active in the area working with communities. And also I'll mention that we have now a modeling service called Zeppelin Floods, where we've taken our model and provided data online, and we're able to run scenarios for future climate and interventions on more of a sort of in more of a service mode as opposed to a research mode. So if there were individual areas that were interested in sort of their own custom model like this, then Zeppelin Floods could help with that. So I would think I'm wrapping up there. That's my closing slide. I hope that this gave you a sense of what we're trying to do with our research and develop understanding about the potential for stormwater capture, reducing flood risk, and achieving different types of benefits, but doing that in ways and using scenarios that align with what people think are good strategies. So thank you all so much for the opportunity to be here today.
All right. Well, thank you for the presentation, Britt. There you go. We have a couple of hands up, and I will start in the room with Phil for Santa Monica.
Brett, thank you for the presentation. And as the mayor of Santa Monica, we're already doing much of what you're asking. In your second sentence or second paragraph, when you open the discussion, you mentioned planning. And you mentioned it again further down, and trying to prevent flooding by making sure we have adequate amounts of natural ground cover. That's unfortunately at odds with what the state is requiring us to do as part of our housing element requirements. So as long as the state keeps telling contractors and developers that they can build out to 100% of their property, it's going to be very difficult to keep not only the urban forest intact, but be able to prevent the floods, because you now have just concrete channels everywhere on your sidewalks and streets. Now, we've done bioswales, we have our SWIP project, we have all the things that we can do right now to try and mitigate some of this. But when I have developers saying, what, we can maximize our profits by building out to the sidewalk on every property we build, it's going to be difficult to have enough room in your flood control channels and everything else, when a lot of that could be solved by having enough permeable ground and tree cover and grass cover in neighborhoods to prevent you having to build all those extra channels. So I think part of this is, yes, you're planning, or you're suggesting that we plan for the worst case scenarios, the extra floods, all that going on. But I'm missing the part that says we could mitigate a lot of that before we have to build more infrastructure. And by doing that, we would save our neighborhoods, give children a chance to have green space, and prevent all that extra water from flowing down sidewalks and streets into the ocean or into other places and creating floods. So I think there has to be both. And I'm encouraged by the fact that you mentioned that at the start of your presentation. You mentioned it further down the slide that talks about motivation as well. But we also need to look at how to mitigate it before it gets to that crisis point. And a lot of that's going to depend on the state requiring developers to include open space in their developments, to include permeable ground cover in their developments. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you very much. Can I respond to that point?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Excellent point. And one of the, I think, nice features of our study is that, we have the ability to look at what could happen if imperviousness gets worse than it is today. So not only can we look at what would happen if we have, more stormwater capture, we can look at what happened if there's less stormwater capture. And we do also want to look at, range of return periods, not just extreme floods, but more frequent events as well. So your point's really well taken, and we'll keep that in mind, is because this issue of the sort of needs of housing and the needs for, ecosystem and other needs, those are, they do create tension, as you pointed out. Thank you.
Okay, Jimmy.
So I'm out in Ventura County, and I know you did mention Ventura County, although your study is more LA County centered. We're facing a lot of issues with erosion, whether it's coastal erosion or erosion along rivers or ravines, roads giving out, this sort of multiple storms over the last couple of years in cycles is leading to a lot of things failing, both public and private property losing anywhere between 10 and 50 feet in a given storm. So are there areas, I'm trying to relate it to your study, are there any areas in your study area that have any of those dynamics? Because they are different than LA, where a lot of things already have concrete basins.
Yeah, great point. Thank you very much for raising that issue of, these sort of compounding effects of erosion and flooding. And we have a study in Riverside, a separate study that is sort of trying to do a better job of estimating hazards below infrastructure that's sort of dealing with the increasing wildfires, more flood flows, overtopping and clogging of drainage infrastructure. And that's a separate study, but it's not part of our LA study, but I just want to acknowledge that is recognized as really an important problem. So I'm sorry, I can't say that's part of the LA study, but it is something that is we have another project in Riverside County. So thank you.
All right, thanks.
Right. Was there anyone else? If not, we'll go to Zoom?
I believe it's Member Copeland from Signal Hill Council Chamber.
Hello?
Wilson?
Yeah, actually, it said
Yes.
Wilson, City of Signal Hill.
Wilson.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the presentations. It's actually really, really interesting. And I love the planning aspect of it. You mentioned a number of groups or entity interested in this modeling and the information you presented. And I'm just looking at it. It seems to me that insurance companies will also be really interested in this information and data, and maybe incorporate it into their policy setting rates. Um, I'm curious as to what do you see that's needed to improve the accuracy of the model that you're presenting, recognizing that we only know what we know, and we don't know what we don't know. But, what helps do you see in improving the model going forward so that the information is ever increasing improvement, right? And I guess one of the things that I also want to say is, I um, was instrumental in the founding of the Rivers and Mountain Conservancy, which has brought hundreds of millions of dollars to Southeast LA County for open space. And I'm really, really proud of that. And I love open space and you did a presentation and you're talking about along the rivers because that's where the Rivers and Mountain Conservancy actually first started. But I'm just throwing this out there. This is not for you, not for everyone listening. Is as we're doing these models and talking about change, we should also incorporate the issue of homelessness in thinking about how the projects are planned, and then what potential mitigations need to be taken that minimize the risk of creating more homelessness encampments because of the nicest the amenities that are now available along the river. So, but the real first question is, what do you see in the improvements for your modeling?
Thank you very much for the question. In terms of the model improvements, I think there's really, I think, a lack of good validation data for just about. That's a big problem with flood risk, is that floods don't happen very often. We don't have sensors in place in areas that flood and damage is caused. We don't documenting damage is not very systematic and accurate to the level that you would be able to assess how good your hazard models are. So you end up kind of calibrating models with less data than you'd like to have. So that's one thing, and I think that's an area where new data sources from sensing systems in urban areas especially could be we're working on that a little bit to try to figure out how do we take advantage of different types of sort of passive monitoring systems that could tell us something about flooding. How deep was it? Where did it occur? Because all of driving around Southern California, the flooding is really fragmented. You can have like deep water in an intersection, or a storm grading could clog, and a lot of is pretty uncertain. So I think more validation data, understanding uncertainties, and that can then drive us to figure out what the weak links are in the model. So that's kind of, and then also as was pointed out earlier, there are a lot of interactions between sediment, erosion, clogging, and flooding. So that's another area where I think we need to do better. But at the end of the day, I think what I'd like to kind of leave you with is that the hazard models are meant to give you some sense of what how severe of flooding should I be thinking about here? Is this an area that doesn't have any flooding? Does it have a foot of flooding? Should I expect 3 feet of flooding here? What's the risk I should plan for? And that's a risk type model that's different from trying to simulate an actual event. Like, when a storm comes, how deep is it going to be and how long is it going to last? So for the purpose of hazards, we model flooding a little bit differently than modeling individual events like a rain forecast. And so I think that's another area where there's a big advances being made, where we're moving towards what's called flood inundation forecasts. So not just hearing a forecast that we're going to get 3 inches of rainfall, but getting a forecast that we're going to have 3 inches of rainfall and there could be flooding of these streets at these intersections. I mean, that kind of information is probably on our way in the next decade or so. So I guess those are kind of the advances that I'm seeing right now.
Okay. Was that it for those in virtual? Well, Brett, I would just again like to say thank you for the information. As you presented the presentation, I thought about, again, up in San Bernardino County, everything in our county, if we haven't already captured it in some type of a basin, and I noticed you noted basins, and I think my city has the dubious honor of probably having the largest basin in San Bernardino County, in the urban area, I'll say, if not throughout the whole county. And then I also noticed you said rain barrels, but does your data, or have you taken your data? And we just recently with Santa Ana Water, SAPA, that I'm on a subcommittee board, we entered into cloud seeding. And so I'm wondering, have we start looking at it? And cloud seeding is nothing new. It's been going on, but we just put it in place in in San Bernardino County. And I start seeing data that's showing relationship to the precipitation. Is it, cloud seeding in action? And I'm sitting here thinking, with all of that, you used LA clearly, because the LA River has been concreted over since the 50s, if I'm not mistaken. So some of us up in San Bernardino County, we have much more open area. We have flood controls, but I didn't sense that your data was capturing some of the other things. And then the other thing I would say, to my colleague's point earlier in Caltrans, is I wonder if we could look at data. I always wonder, with the cloud clogging and freeways and everything backing up, how are we doing in terms of, or are you looking at the data in partnership with the state on any preventative action, proactive maintenance, when we know that there's going to be precipitation? I mean, we sit here and listen to it on the news every day, but I don't necessarily see if there's a strike team that goes out in advance to eliminate some of this trash and stuff that covers over. And I think about San Diego recently, when you saw the horrific flooding and the freeway was just totally wiped out. So are you picking up those pieces in this whole analysis, or is it just focusing on what's flowing in the channels?
Wow, you raised a number of really, really important issues there, and let me speak especially to the channel maintenance and infrastructure maintenance piece. In our interactions with county flood control districts and city flood groups, I mean, they are aware of storms coming, and they do make efforts to try to clean and get infrastructure as ready as possible before these big storms, and a lot of the outreach that's done by the Weather Service and other organizations to really get warnings out that this is going to be a wet storm, I think precipitates more of that. But I think another challenge that often is faced from the flood control districts is that getting permits sometimes to clean infrastructure can be really challenging. If vegetation gets established in a flood control channel, then there may be some sort of wetlands implications there that make it harder to get a permit to clean your flood controlled channel. If an endangered species is spotted in a flood control channel and you want to clean it, that can be a problem for a government trying to provide for the safety of the public. And I think those dynamics were part of what evolved in San Diego this past year, where there were communities that were in a 100-year flood zone. The area that flooded in San Diego was a 100-year flood zone. But it's also possible the flooding was made worse because that there was challenges that the city faced trying to get the cleaning done, and that may have been confounded by wetlands and ecosystem permitting challenges. So I would say that, like, if there's one of the barriers we face increasingly is in trying to even manage a lot of different needs is sort of the permitting that can really slow down some of these sort of activities and projects and programs needed to provide the safety.
Well, thank you for that. And again, offline, maybe we could look at it even further in detail, but I appreciate the presentation. So with that,
thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Well, that pretty much has concluded all of our presentations. And now we'll move into the chair's report. And of course, they've given me a script that says, just to remind you that please be sure to register for the SCAG's 59th Annual Regional Conference and General Assembly. It will be at JW Marriott Resort and Spa, Palm Desert, from May 2nd through the 3rd, and you can still do registration, but online registration will conclude April 26th. And other than that, staff, is there something you would like to add? Either one.
I just wanted to briefly share that to thank you to all those who promoted our scholarship program in your areas. We received about 115 applications from high school seniors and community college students throughout the region. And we will be recommending about 50 students for consideration to the scholarship committee, which meets April 15th. So those awardees would be announced at the regional council meeting in May. So that's it for my update. Thank you.
Okay, and before we go, is there any member here who would like to share any type of announcement? Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to take a quick minute to thank you. As for all your hard work, your time, your commitment, we really appreciate you. Your mentorship, your guidance. I certainly wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. So thank you for continuing to open up doors and leading the way for future leaders. Supervisor Plancarte, you're absolutely right, sir. You definitely have me beat by about 100 miles, but you always show up with a great attitude, man, and looking sharp. So it's very much appreciated. And to the Honorable Ms. Crosswhite, from day one, your energy, your attitude, and the way you represent your city is impeccable, admirable, and congratulations to you both. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Daniel. No, I've enjoyed this. This is just always, this whole environment area space has been very important to me from actually my roots. So I will not be going away. I also saw that I have Mr. Bishop. He has a comment that he'd like to make.
Hi, Deborah. I just wanted to thank you for your years of service on this committee and with SCAG. You've been a great breath of fresh air, and I love your leadership on water. It's been greatly for us in the high desert water, such a key issue. I just want to thank you so much. And you've done a great job representing all of San Bernardino County throughout the SCAG area. And thank you very much on behalf of the town of Apple Valley.
Thank you, Art. I really appreciate it. Being that I'm born and raised in San Diego, I call myself a coastal child. And also I tell everybody, and up here, I came in '88, it is such a blessing to be born in a border city. You just don't know. Somebody said earlier, what you don't know until you know. And I've enjoyed the fact that I've been able to bring what I've learned, born and raised, and grew up around the Port of San Diego to bring it here, and then doing my master's with the Port of Los Angeles. So starting all of us may have started in water at birth, but it's just been amazing. Boy, and if you want to have cocktails later, I'll explain the conflict the compromise just getting born, okay? But it has been exciting. It's been fun. I've enjoyed everybody here because, you know, I feel like I've got relationships, friendships that are not going to change. It's because I'm stepping away from the chair. You know, I just love to say those of us who are chronologically mature, we just gonna keep on pushing and keep on pushing. And so with that, it's a wrap. Elvis is leaving the building.
Thank you, Mayor.
Elvis has left the building.
I didn't get to say it, but Deborah has been great.
You know, I don't care if it's society. It all started with one. And everybody goes, well, think about it. 6 days, wrapped up some play. You can't walk. I don't know, baby.